Hi, we'll talk now about the third topic of the course, which is respiration. So all organisms respire. Actually, it is the production of ATP from organic molecules. So this aerobic respiration requires oxygen, and this where ventilation and gas exchange come in. So keep in mind that respiration is not breathing. Breathing is another mechanism. So here you can see how the, let's make a pointer. Here you can see the mechanism of gas exchange in fish occur on moist surfaces. In organs, the respiratory organ here is called gills. Some other animals have tracheal systems, and the advanced animals have lungs, like in human. So in human respiratory system, the air travels through the lungs where gas gas exchange occur. And you can see here that this gas of exchange and circulation of oxygen all over the body and the collection of carbon dioxide from organs occur by the help of the circulatory system. In a human body, the breathing leads to air into the lungs, and owing to the transport of oxygen by the circulatory system to the organs via the arteries and the blood capillaries, at the cells and organ or tissues, there is exchange of gas occur to supply each single cell with oxygen, and in the same time, these capillaries collect carbon dioxide from every single cell inside our body. So gas exchange supply oxygen for cellular respiration, and it disposes carbon dioxide. Animal requires very large moist surface of respiration for efficient diffusion of gases between their cells and the respiratory medium. Either the respiratory media is air or water. So from this diagram, you can see that here, this sketch represented the respiratory surface, and you can see it is folded to show that it is increasing in surface area. And this enables the exchange of oxygen and carbon dioxide. Soon after exchange occur in the lungs or gills or trachea, whatever the animal, this is collected, the gases are collected by the circulatory system. That soon at the cellular level, oxygen is conveyed to the cells for cellular respiration and ultimately the generation of ATP, which is needed for energy for the metabolism occurring inside the cells. This process of cellular respiration give rise to carbon dioxide that have to move back via the circulatory system and outside to the respiratory media, either water or air, via the same respiratory membrane. So generally, animals exchange oxygen and carbon dioxide across moist body surface. So what about gills? Gills are outfolding of the body that is very important for gas exchange. In some invertebrates, and invertebrates are animals that lacks the vertebral column, like the starfish or sea star. This starfish, if you get a cross-sectional level in the sea star, you can see its body is covered by gills at every section. So in this invertebrate animal, the sea star, gills have a simple shape and distributed all over its body. While in worms, you can see segmented worms, these worms have flap-like projections called parapodia. These flap-like projections act as a gill. And you can see that you need to know that these gills are repeated on each segment of these segmented walls. The gills of clams, crayfish, and the other animal are only restricted to local body surface or local body region. So there is a major difference between clams, crayfish, and other higher animals compared to the sea star and the segmented wall. You can see here in both examples, the gills are distributed all over the body. While you can see here in clams, like the scallop, you can see that gills only confined to the internal region, as you can see from the figure. While in crayfish, you can see that gills only confined to this region of the thoracic region. You can see the gills are buried inside the animal at that region. So why the gas exchange system is very effective and what is needed to have a very effective gas exchange system. So you can see gills in aquatic animals is the process is increased by a process of ventilation and the counter current flow of the blood and water. So you can see the gills here. Usually the gills in fish is covered by operculum or a gill cover. You can see that water goes inside the mouth, flushes. Water, of course, is full of oxygen. It flushes the gills here of the fish. When you enlarge the gills, you can see that the water moves through the flaps or filaments of the gills. When you further enlarge the region of the gill filament, you can see that blood flow, the water flow that is blue in arrows, you can see that it is flows in the region that is heavily supplied with blood capillaries. And you need to take in mind that this flow of the water in the region, in the lamellae region that is full of blood capillaries, you need to understand that the flow is opposite to the flow of the blood inside the capillaries. And this is the second parameter, important parameter in the process of gas exchange in gills. So moving the blood in this direction and moving the water in this direction and movement of blood in this direction, the counter flow of water flow and the blood flow simplify the exchange of carbon dioxide and oxygen. So you can see that in the water, the tension or the concentration of the oxygen is decreased while the water passes over the capillaries. And as well in the blood capillaries, the tension of oxygen is increased because it is oxygen have been exchanged with the carbon dioxide inside the blood capillaries. What about other systems? Other systems like the tracheal system for insect, as example, it consists of branches tube. So you can see all the yellow stuff here is the tracheal system. And it appears branched all over the body of the insect. And this tracheal system supply oxygen from the spiracles. You can see the spiracles supply oxygen from the outside to the inside. And you can see that there is air sacs as well all over the body to store this oxygen-rich air. If you enlarge a part of the tracheal system, you can see here the spiracle, and these spiracles convey to a branch tube that soon store this air in the air sacs. If you enlarge more, you can see that these tracheal branches are embedded inside the muscles of the insects. And you can see as well, there is a lot of mitochondria, which is used for the generation of the ATP, the currency unit of energy in bodies of animals. And this mitochondria is waiting for the oxygen coming through the spiracle and the tracheal branches. You can see another example of insect, the beetle, for example. It have as well spiracle that enable the exchange of gas, exchange of oxygen and carbon dioxide, oxygen to the inside through the tracheal system, branch tracheal system, as you can see, and carbon dioxide as well to the outside. So this slide show another system of gas exchange or respiration, which is the tracheal system. And it is very obvious in insects. So what about gas exchange through cells? How the mechanism occur? How the mechanism of gas exchange? It majorly relies on diffusion. So it diffuses the gases. Actually, the exchange occur by the diffusion. And for this to occur, some modifications need to be done in order to effectively have the gas exchange process. So all organisms that obtain energy through this cellular respiration rely on the diffusion to acquire oxygen and to eliminate carbon dioxide. So although animal respiratory structure are quite diverse and they have many structure along the animal kingdom, but they need all to facilitate the diffusion through three adaptations. So majorly there are three adaptations needed for any respiratory structure to have an efficient mechanism of respiration. The first adaptation is in the respiratory surface. They need to remain moist. They need to remain moist. Why? Because cell membrane are only, so to enable the gas to dissolve first in water to be easily diffused through the membrane, through the respiratory surface. And this is the first modification. The second modification, that the respiratory system need to be thin to minimize the diffusion distance, diffusion of gases from the outside to the inside or vice versa. The third modification, that this respiratory surface need to be of large surface area to allow enough gas exchange by diffusion, of course, to meet the requirement of the organism. So during diffusion, individual molecules, this is important point, individual molecules, either oxygen or carbon dioxide, these individual molecules move from areas where they are higher in concentrations to areas of lower concentration. So this gas exchange by diffusion require concentration gradient of gases. Again, يعني شباب المفروض ان هذه الجازز سواء كان كربون دايوكسيد اند اوكسجين بيتنقلوا من الكونسنتريشن العالي للكونسنتريشن الواطي. It's very obvious during gas exchange. عشان كده الهواء اللي داخل الرئه بتاعتنا، الهواء جاي من مكان بره مليان كونسنتريشن للاكسجين، فبيروح للرئه بتاعتنا اللي فيها الاكسجين تركيزه اقل. خلاص، لما بيبقى جوه الرئه هو بيجي له البلاد كابيلاريز شايله كربون دايوكسيد، يبقى اصبح في الوضع ده عند البلاد كابيلاريز الكربون دايوكسيد از هاير ان كونسنتريشن، فبيطلع من الكابيلاري يروح لللنج، والعكس بيحصل ان الاكسجين جوه اللنج بيبقى هاير ان كونسنتريشن، فبيمشي من اللنج يروح للكابيلاريز. So it is very important to have this concentration gradient to facilitate the gas exchange. For spiders, land snails, and most terrestrial animals have internal lung. So you can see here, for the amphibians, as an example, frog ventilates the lung by the positive pressure breathing, which forces air down its trachea and then inflates the lung, and they close the nostril to keep air inside the lung. In our case, you have another complicated structure for our respiration, which is the lung. And actually, it is a system of branching tubules or ducts that convey air to the lung. The inhaled air starts from the nostrils and passes through the pharynx into the trachea bronchi, and then bronchioles, which is inside the lung, each lung. This is ultimately lead to the dead end alveoli inside the lung, if you have a closer look. So again, the air inhaled from the nostrils to the nasal cavity via pharynx to the trachea to the two bronchi and then to the bronchioles, which is inside the lungs, which lead to a dead end air sac, which is called alveoli. If you enlarge an alveoli, you can see that the alveoli is heavily covered with blood capillaries for gas exchange. It takes oxygen and release a carbon dioxide. It takes oxygen to the oxygen-rich blood and release carbon dioxide from the oxygen poor blood. So mammalian ventilate their lung by negative pressure breathing. This negative pressure breathing actually pulls air into the lung. So the lung volume increase as the rib muscles and diaphragm contract. So gas is diffused down a pressure gradient. What's the meaning of down pressure gradient? That's mean from down, that's mean from high to low pressure gradient in the lungs and the other organs. A gas diffuses from a region of a high pressure to a region of a lower pressure. That's meaning down a pressure gradient. In the lungs and tissue, oxygen and carbon dioxide diffused from where their pressure are higher to where they are lower. So you can see here, once air has been inhaled, the rib cage, al-qafas al-sadri, expands as rib muscles contract. So two events occur. Actually, three events occur. The first event is the rib cage expand. This is facilitated by the rib muscle contraction and the diaphragm contraction as well. This diaphragm contraction with the rib muscle contraction lead to the expansion of the rib cage. And this is very obvious to enlarge the area of the rib cage to be more than enough to occupy large volume of air. While during exhalation, the process is reversed. So the diaphragm is relaxed and the rib muscles relax. That's compressing the rib cage for getting the air outside. And actually, this is the process of breathing. It's not respiration. Again, you can see here the mechanism of breathing. During inhalation, there is rhythmic nerve impulses from brain that stimulates the diaphragm, as we said, and the intercostal muscles or the rib muscles to contract. This, of course, increase the size of the chest cavity, causing air to rush in. While during exhalation, all these muscles are relaxed, forcing the air out of the lung. So what about the control of breathing in humans? Actually, in humans, the main breathing control centers are in the brain, and it is called medulla oblongata. You can see the location of the medulla oblongata. So the nerve signals trigger these nerve signals coming from the medulla oblongata triggers the contraction of rib muscles and diaphragm, as we said before. As well, these breathing control centers can respond to the pH of the blood and the cerebrospinal fluid, because as you know, the pH is very critical in controlling in helping the brain to sense the amount of carbon dioxide that exists in blood. So as you know, carbon dioxide, if it's dissolved in the blood, it may form a carbonic acid. This process is very reversible. Carbonic acid, it lowers the pH of the blood. So in this case, if the carbon dioxide percentage increase in the blood, so This, as we said, will lower the pH of the blood. So the brain and the breathing control center will respond to this pH, this lowering of pH. So we'll understand that the blood needs oxygenation. So it sends signals to the rib cage to have an inhalation and the breathing, as well as nerve signals coming from regions of the heart and sensors on the aorta will send signals to indicate to the breathing control to indicate the percentage of carbon dioxide and oxygen levels in the blood. As we said, the medulla is an important region that controls the breathing phenomena. And this medulla, as we said, regulate the rate and the depth of the breathing in response of the pH change in one of the very important fluid in our body is the cerebrospinal fluid. The medulla adjusts the breathing rate and the depth to match metabolic demands. So for instance, if you need a lot of oxygen, you need to have very deep breathing behavior, okay? Like, and you keep the air inside your lung, okay? So that's so the breathing rate could be slow or could be fast, okay? And the depth as well. So here you can see this represent the air sacs or air space inside our lung. You can see that the inhaled air goes inside the air sac and the carbon dioxide is expelled through the air sac. Once the oxygen is inside the air sac, is transferred or diffused through the one cell thickness epithelial cell, transferred to the blood capillaries. Soon after that, it goes to the left atrium, which is oxygen-rich blood, which soon is pumped, as we said in the last lecture, is pumped by the aorta to the rest of the body. At the tissues, there is a capillary bed as well that relieves oxygen to the cells and collect carbon dioxide back to the venules, capillaries, and then venules. And the oxygen poor blood is will be collected in the right atrium and will pumped by the pulmonary arteries to the lung, and so the exchange occur in the air sacs. Again, you can see that how gas exchange occur. Actually, it occurs mainly, as we said, in 4 steps. The bulk air leads to the air to be internalized into the alveoli, where diffusion occurs between the alveolar wall, which is one cell thickness, and the blood capillaries. Soon after that, blood is collected by larger arteries, and these arteries convey the oxygen-rich blood to the left atrium. This, in the left atrium, the blood is moved to the left ventricle, where it is bumped through the aorta to the rest of the body, represented here by this capillary bed. In these organs or tissues and cells, another exchange of gases occur, where oxygen is released into cells and the carbon dioxide is collected by the vena cava and reach the right atrium, where it is pumped for oxygenation in the alveoli. So again, the bulk flow carries surrounding air, high oxygen, low carbon dioxide, through the respiratory surface. The oxygen diffuses from air or water through the respiratory surface into capillaries, while carbon dioxide, as we said, diffuse out of the capillaries and through as well the respiratory surface. This bulk flow of blood transport gases between the surface and the tissues, and blood is pumped through the body by the heart. The diffusion transfers oxygen out of the capillaries into nearby tissue and transforms carbon dioxide from tissues into the capillaries. And this is the fourth step. So what about the alveoli as the structure and the main part of the lung that actually do the process of gas exchange? You can see here that these lung, the bronchi, the trachea is supported by a ring of cartilage. Okay, actually it's not a complete cartilage. This cartilage will help the trachea to not collapse in during the process of breathing. This trachea lead to a bronchi, two bronchi that is divided inside the lung into a lot of bronchioles that end up with the dead end. You can see if you enlarge a part of the lung that end up with many alveoli. If you enlarge one of the alveoli, you can see that the alveoli is heavily supported, heavily supplied with blood capillaries. You can see that the pulmonary artery carrying oxygen poor blood is divided into a lot of capillaries that is collected by another set of capillaries to the pulmonary vein. So pulmonary vein carry oxygen rich blood. Keep in mind that the pulmonary vein, it is the only vein that carries oxygen rich blood. Normally veins carry oxygen poor blood. As well, the pulmonary artery, it is the only pulmonary artery that carries oxygen poor blood, because normally all of the arteries push the blood from heart to the organs and tissues and cells, and these arteries carry oxygen rich blood. So as you said, this alveoli is covered by a dense network of capillaries that supplied with deoxygenated blood collected from the right ventricle through the pulmonary artery. In humans, it was estimated that there are 350 million alveoli, and with total absorbing surface or respiratory surface, which is around 90 meters. Here you can see again an enlarged figure to show the structure of the alveoli. You can see how the blood enters, comes to the alveoli as a venule from the pulmonary venule and is broken down to capillaries that soon is collected by another set of capillaries to the pulmonary arteriole. And you can see here the thoracic cage. Okay, continuing about the gas exchange, let's have a closer look inside the alveoli. So actually, where is the respiratory membrane here? So actually, the respiratory membrane consists of two layers. The alveolar layer, as you can see, this is the alveolar layer, and the capillary wall. So you can see it's the capillary wall are very narrow. As we said in the last lecture, the capillary wall have the thickness of a red blood cell. And if you remember, this will enable the slow movement of the blood in the capillaries and enough time for the process of gas exchange. So as you can see, the blood coming from the pulmonary artery or arteriole, represented by blue color, which means oxygen poor blood, moves along the capillary wall and get in touch with the respiratory membrane, which is consists, as we said, the wall of the alveoli and the wall of the capillary. you can see as well that gas will start to diffuse, the carbon dioxide gas diffuse from inside the capillary to the inside of the alveoli. In the meanwhile, the oxygen is diffused from the alveoli into the blood capillaries. And of course, as I said, it moves from high pressure of oxygen to low pressure of oxygen. As well here, it moves from high pressure carbon dioxide to low pressure carbon dioxide. Ultimately, when leaving the alveolar region, you can see that blood represented by the red color have been oxygenated. The inner alveolar membrane, you can see that it is coated. This membrane, actually it's a surfactant fluid. And as we said, this provides the moist surface for the gas exchange. And as well, it has an important function, and it prevents the collapse as well and the adhering of the alveolar membrane to each other. As we said, a network of capillaries covers most of the alveolar surface, and the walls, as we said, consist of a single layer of epithelial cells. So either the wall of the alveoli or the wall of the capillary, either one of them is consisting of single layer of epithelial cells. And the type of epithelial cells of these layers are simple squamous epithelium. So as we said, gas diffuse through the respiratory membrane, which consists of alveolar wall and the capillary wall, and these two membranes is glued together by protein fibers. The respiratory membrane, as we said before, it needs to have a very important adaptation, which is the small diffusion distance. So it was estimated and measured that the diffusion distance is around 0.5 to 1 micrometers. And of course, this will allow the transfer or the gas exchange, efficient gas exchange. Again, closer look, you can see the oxygen present in the alveoli will move to the hemoglobin inside the red blood cells. You can see very obvious how the capillary wall are one cell thickness, how the alveolar wall are one cell thickness, how they are glued together by protein fibers. You can see as well that surfactant fluid that enables the moisture content of the respiratory membrane. So here the oxygen, once it's internalized into the blood cell, it will be loosely bind to the hemoglobin. Why it is important to be loosely bind to hemoglobin? This loose binding will help in the process of giving oxygen to the tissues. In the same time, you can see that carbon dioxide will diffuse out from the capillaries as well from the high concentration into low concentration inside the alveoli. As well, you can see that even the cells that near the blood capillaries can convey carbon dioxide to the blood capillaries and to the air in the alveolus. So how is the protection of gas exchange system, how it is protected from pathogens and particles? So pathogens such as bacteria and dust particles are actually present in the air, and we breathe these, and they are very dangerous if not removed. So there are two types of cells that provide mechanism to help to achieve this protection. And we already talked about these two kinds of cells before. So we have the goblet cells, and these goblet cells found in the epithelial lining of the trachea, bronchi, and some bronchioles. They secrete mucus. And actually, the mucus is a very thin film secreted over the internal lining. This sticky liquid traps pathogens and the particles, so they prevent these particles and pathogens from entering the alveoli. In this event, these pathogens, if they enter the alveoli, they will cause infection or physical damage in case they are particles. As well, there is another important cells, which is the ciliated cells. They are also present in the epithelial lining of the respiratory tract, and they are continually flicking to move mucus outside of the respiratory system. And this mucus, which already secreted by goblet cells, they flick and move this mucus that is trapping the pathogen and dust materials away from the lungs. So when mucus reaches the top of the trachea, it passes down the gullet during normal swallowing. So you can see here the structure of a goblet cells under the light microscope, and you can see diagrammatic sketch showing the difference between a goblet cell that is full with mucus waiting to be released and the other ciliated cells that is flicking or beating to move the mucus that is used to trap pathogen and bacteria. So you can see that the respiratory surface, the respiratory tract here is lined by these two kinds of cells. Majorly, it is ciliated cells, and you have a number of goblet cells in between. So let's have a quick look on the breathing and breathing rate and the exercise. So actually, during exercise, the rate and the depth of breathing is increased. So oxygen dissolves in blood. So this will supply more oxygen rapidly to respiring cells. While as well, during exercise, the carbon dioxide in muscles will increase. This will be detected by the brain, which will order, as we said before, the intercostal muscles or the rib muscles, as well as the diaphragm muscles, to contract and relax more rapidly to enable the breathing behavior. Okay, this will increase the breathing rate. So by the end, you will have faster removal of carbon dioxide by faster and deeper breathing. That's mean the rate of respiration has been increased. So what about the respiratory pigment? Actually, the respiratory pigment, it is the hemoglobin. Majorly in mammals is the hemoglobin. So respiratory pigments are proteins that transport oxygen. And as we said, in almost all vertebrates, it is a hemoglobin, which is contained inside the erythrocytes. Like all respiratory pigments, hemoglobin loads oxygen in the lungs and unloads the oxygen in the tissues or cells. So it is reversibly combined to oxygen. The binding of oxygen to one subunit, as we said before in the last lecture, oxygen is consisted of 4 subunits. So the binding of oxygen to one subunit induces the other subunits or parts of the hemoglobin to bind to oxygen with more affinity. And a drop in the pH, that's mean a blood with higher carbon dioxide concentration, lower the affinity of hemoglobin to oxygen. As you can see here, this is the 3D structure of the hemoglobin. You can see that it consists of 4 units, 4 identical units, have 4 regions of heme group or iron. These 4 polypeptide chains loads oxygen in the lungs, as you can see, and unloads oxygen in the tissues. And you can see this is the balanced chemical equation. Carbon dioxides in plasma, represented by water in blood, will form a carbonic acid. This carbonic acid is very unstable acid that soon dissociate into hydrogen ion which lowers the pH of the blood and the bicarbonate ion. So what about the fetus inside the uterus? So the human fetus exchanges gas with his or her mother's blood through, you can see that it can exchange of gas through the placenta, and the embryo, the fetus is connected with the umbilical cord, which contain actually the blood vessels moving for exchange between the fetus and the mother. So majorly the exchange occur at this region of the placenta. What happens if there is a problem in the process of breathing? Okay, so if an individual attempts to inhale and swallow at the same time, this reflex may fail and the food can be lodged or trapped in the larynx. So this will eventually block air from entering the lung. So the perfect way to save this individual is to do the life-saving Heimlich maneuver. In this Heimlich maneuver, it can save his life or her life. So you can see, you can grasp the hands between the navel and the breast bone, actually just below the thoracic cage, and you quickly pull upward and toward your body, so to expel the object that have been trapped inside the larynx. Pressing forcefully and suddenly upward and inward just below the diaphragm forces the air from the lung, which can expel food blocking the trachea or the larynx. This maneuver can be repeated if necessary. Another thing, so you can see the difference between a normal lung and a smoker lung. And this smoker lung is showing a cancer. So this is a major difference. You can see a clear difference between a healthy lung and a smoker's lung have been diagnosed with cancer. So let's have three important definitions. So respiration, actually, it's a series of chemical reactions which occur in all living cells in which food is broken down to release energy, usually by combining it with oxygen. So that's why we normally call it stellar respiration. While gas exchange occur across a respiratory surface, as the example of gas exchange across the alveolar wall through in the alveolus of the lung. So it is different expression than the respiration. For breathing, actually, it is a muscular movement which keeps the respiratory surface, always supplied with oxygen. And this concludes the third topic, which is respiration. And I'm waiting for your questions.